Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadiens Connection Podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio, where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained, and we talk about the Montreal Canadiens. My name is Amy Johnson. I'll be your host for today's show. This is episode 341 of the Canadiens Connection Podcast, titled Reality Check. Can the Habs stage one last winning streak to grab a playoff spot? Ooh, boy, I don't know if they can, but we're going to talk about it today. And when I say we, it's because I'm also pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, the editor-in-chief, founder, and president of Rocket Sports. His name is Rick Stevens. I'm feeling a bit dubious.
Are
Mr.
you?
Stevens, yes.
Yeah,
And
it's yeah, you got to put your seatbelt on for the ride this year because the Canadiens have been up and down all over the place and on a bit of a downer this week. Busy week, very busy week for the Canadiens. It was the world of sports. Regular season baseball has opened in
that's right.
Major League Baseball.
Phillies won their opener
Oh, did they?
again at the Nationals Park, which
Wow.
is always handy.
I've lost baseball. I used to be, I know a lot of our listeners are Blue Jays fans. I grew up a Tigers fan mainly because we had family in Ann Arbor, and I've been to plenty of Minnesota Twins games. Followed the Twins for a while, but and followed the Expos games, and of course went to Expos games when I was in Montreal. But is there time for to be a big fan of everything? I don't know that there is, especially when the Canadiens are so involved in the playoff hunt right now.
Weather's baseball. It's hot here today.
Pardon?
I'm in Pennsylvania. It's hot. I'm in Pennsylvania, so I'm going to use Fahrenheit. It's supposed to be in the low 80s here today. It's like June here today. It's hot.
Just below freezing in Montreal.
Okay, well, you
still
can take
hockey
some
weather.
of it. It's too warm here. Thank you.
Now, what you're saying, you want some of the cooler temps.
Yes, please.
All
I'm one
right.
of those people that I'm happy with like mid 70s and no higher.
A narrow range.
Yeah, well, I am also one of those weirdos that doesn't mind the cold in the winter.
Oh,
so,
okay. All right.
So, yeah. But it's nice out.
Now that we've got our preferences out on the table.
Right. We have hockey to talk about. And it's a dicey situation right now for the Montreal Canadiens, and we're going to get to it in a minute. The way that we're going to get started in that in the first segment is we're going to talk about these 4 games that the Canadiens played this past week that definitely did not go according to plan. We're going to talk a bit about that, get you some roster news, an update on the prospects. The Laval Rocket has some big news, and some other notes from around the NHL. Before we dive into segment 2, which is our big topic, where we are going to talk about how the Habs hot streak has completely shut off. It's turned cold at this point, at such a crucial point in the playoff race. We're going to talk about this sudden skid that the Canadiens find themselves in and what the ramifications are for that the wild card playoff spot that they are still in contention for, and whether or not they can use these final games down the stretch to turn things around. We're going to get into all of that, give you the stats, the projections, all those kinds of things. And then in the final segment, we're going to let you have your say. We've got some very in-depth listener and viewer responses to last week's show. And so we're going to bring you some really great comments from our listeners and viewers in response to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. That also means that there is a question that we pose to our fans every week. We'll have one for you later on today in the second segment. And so the way You get to interact with the show is by sending us your responses to each week's question of the week. You can do that by texting us at the Rocket Sports text line. That's 585-3-ROCKET. You can also send us an email, hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Hit us up on social media at Habs Connection, or just drop a comment on our YouTube channel. So let's first take a look at the games, do a quick swing around the games that the Canadiens played this week. The one that was probably at least the most entertaining was the tilt in Montreal last Saturday against the Colorado Avalanche that went all the way to the shootout. Granted, Montreal only came out with 1 point out of that game because Colorado did end up victorious, winning 5-4 in the shootout. But it was an interesting game to watch.
Well, on the good side, the Canadiens scored 3 times in the third period to tie the game and to take it to overtime. But they were down 4-1 in this game, and a bit of a theme during the week where bad starts, they trailed, and we heard Nick Suzuki this week say, we can't keep doing this, having to claw our way back after digging a hole, so yeah, that was the difficulty, difficulty to find themselves down to the Avalanche. Credit to them fighting back in the third period, and the usual culprits, the defense breaking down. Sam Montembeault has not been very good for a while now. But they, as you said, they scrounged a point out of it.
They did. Then the wheels fell off, basically, for the rest of the week. They started their road trip going Tuesday into St. Louis. And that was a forgettable performance, to say the least. Losing to the St. Louis Blues 6-1. And if there's anybody who was forgettable in that game individually, it was Mike Matheson.
Mike Matheson was a -4 in that game. His partner, Alex Carrier, also a -4. But when Mike Matheson is dreadful, he looks like one of the worst players on the ice. And he has been awful. And again, Canadiens didn't start well. Blues outshot them 14-5 in the first period. They were fortunate to come out of that first period just down 2-1. But then, the wheels fell off, as you said. This was an ugly game, and it was one we were wondering whether Jakub Dobeš would start. Jakub Dobeš, kind of his off-season home in St. Louis, kind of a homecoming for him. He has family there. But nope, Marty went with his favorite, Sammy Montembeault, for the umpteenth straight time, and Montembeault was not good in this one.
So that meant that going into a back-to-back situation for Thursday-Friday night, Jakub Dobeš did get tapped for his role between the pipes in Philadelphia on Thursday night. You'll recall last week on the show, I said if there's they're going to need to take advantage of any opportunity that they can to grab points. And I said if there's one game on next week's schedule that they have maybe an easier chance to do that, it's Thursday night against Philadelphia, because the Flyers haven't been playing very well. Well, that was the understatement of the weekend on the show, apparently, because that was before I knew that they were playing so poorly that John Tortorella was going to be fired the morning before the game, which meant the Flyers had a little bit of fire in the belly after their coach got dismissed. And even despite being down a defenseman, only had 5 defensemen playing in the game, Philly managed to pull out a win, 6-4. Without John Tortorella behind the bench, and poor Jakub Dobeš was not getting much support in front of him.
Boy, just the chances that Philly had, players all alone in front of the defensive system, again looked terrible for Montreal, and and listen, the other part of it is Jakub Dobeš, I think, was trying to do a little too much. It had been more than 2 weeks since his last start, and you just can't manage goalies like that. We've seen St. Louis do that with each season. He's done that, and earlier this season with Primo, leaving him on the bench for a month, and here you are again. So Dobeš goes in, and Dobeš is very good when he's calm, when he's, he doesn't move a lot. We heard Carey Price compliment him during that 5-game winning streak to start his NHL career. Carey Price said how calm he looked and how that gives the skaters in front a lot of confidence. And Dobeš was very active. He can be an acrobatic goaltender, but I don't think he's at his best in that when he plays like that. Not that this was his fault, but the Canadiens were awful, as you said. Flyers, who were coming into this on a 6-game losing streak, they could have been, on the emotional downside if the Canadiens went up early, given that their coach had been fired earlier that day. But it was, players with some connection to Montreal. We saw Nicolas Deslauriers score his first goal of the season against his former team. Matvei Michkov, he's got reason to not like the Canadiens. Almost had a post away, an empty net post away from a hat trick. So this was a tough loss. This loss, I think, really hurt the Canadiens.
And they played again just 24 hours later, heading down to Carolina. One of their tougher matchups of the week. And Sebastian Aho, Seth Jarvis, they took it to Montreal. Sam Montembeault back in net. There were some goals again that he probably would have liked back. Carolina beating Montreal on Friday night 4-1.
The Canadiens did some good things here. I thought that Matheson played a lot better than against Carolina. Josh Anderson staked them to they've been starting poorly, starting slowly. Well, there was Josh Anderson scoring 23 seconds in, except it was Carolina rookie Jason Blake. He scored about 18 seconds later, so it was a 1-1 tie before we got to the 1 minute mark of this game. And then Carolina just completely took over. They dominated Montreal in every respect of the game.
The Habs couldn't get shots on goal. Shots on goal were like only 13 through 2.5 periods or something like that. It was they ended up with 15 shots overall, and that was after padding those shot totals with an extra attacker near the end of the game. Shots are 25-15 overall, I think. But yes, Carolina just completely dominated, and we heard Kent Hughes, a clip who played last week, saying, we can play against anybody, not the Carolina Hurricanes. The Montreal Canadiens didn't look like they were in the same league at all on Friday night. So that with 72 games played, that means 10 games remaining. The Canadiens have a 33-30-9 score for the season, record for the season. We're going to get into the ins and outs of all of that in the second segment, so we won't spend too much time there. The big takeaway is it was a bad week, and we'll see if they can stop the bleeding on Sunday afternoon.
And they wake up on Saturday morning not in a playoff spot.
That's
Wild
right.
Game, the Columbus and Vancouver. Was Columbus down 3-0 in the first period? Something like that. Tied it and beat Vancouver 7-6 in a shootout to get 2 points, to get their second win in a row. And that was enough, apparently, to bump the Canadiens out of that second wild card spot. So they're on the outside as we record. They're on the outside looking in right now. They are winless in 5 games. They won just 1 of their last 8 games on the road. Sam Montembeault has lost 4 straight. So yeah, they're on a cold streak. They're on a cold streak.
One bright spot this week was the fact that on Friday night in Carolina, one Kaiden Guhle was back in the lineup. He recovered from his quadriceps laceration injury that he suffered at the end of January. Put in a decent amount of ice time against the Hurricanes as well.
This is remarkable, given that, at the time, it was such a serious looking injury, and the Canadiens provided no kind of guidance on this one. There was questions about whether he would be out for the season. How serious was that cut to his quadricep? We had our medical expert, Dr. Stephen Morris, on, and we'll have to go back and check the tape, but I believe he predicted it would be about 8 weeks. And it turned out to be, I think, 9.5 weeks or thereabouts. And before he suffered the injury on the 28th of January. So, as you said, a fair bit of time against the Hurricanes, 19 minutes. And Marty St. went with 7 defensemen. Joshua Waugh was a healthy scratch to make that happen. 11 forwards, 7 defensemen. And if you were wondering who was going to sit when Kaiden Guhle came back, it's going to be Xhekaj. He just played. It wasn't even 4 minutes against Carolina. 3:52 in ice time for Xhekaj.
And I even said during the game, he took that. One of the goals against was because he left Seth Jarvis completely alone on the rush because he was too busy trying to go into the middle of the ice to lay a big hit on somebody. His priority needs to be on defense first and physicality second, and that priority seems to be a little out of whack for Xhekaj right now. And I think he'll find himself watching games from above unless he fixes that.
Yeah, he was just he chased that hit.
He did, and he missed it.
And opened up the 2-on-1. Yeah. And Seth Jarvis, Seth
Can't
Jarvis
leave
is
him alone.
One of my favorites. But the dish, and it was a lovely play. Unfortunately,
just please don't say sauce.
Oh yeah. All started by I understand Xhekaj wasn't getting into the lineup very often last night, wanted to make something happen, but
he made something
a bad
happen
choice.
all right.
Yeah, that's true.
Not the way he wanted to go. But congratulations to Kaiden Guhle getting back from this injury in time to finish out a decent amount of games at the end of the season. And Rick, he finally got to obviously meet with the media this week and talked briefly a little bit about going through this injury.
He said, quote, "It was definitely the scariest moment of my life," end quote. And he said when you see the injury, he didn't really know what was going on. The paramedics were talking about, had he sliced an artery and there was a lot of blood. He didn't know. They didn't know. Fortunately, none of that was the case. And smart that he came when he returned. He has incorporated cut-resistant equipment into his return, got used to it during the rehab, and said that he's going to add neck protection soon, like Patrick Laine does and others. So yeah, we saw how that helped Josh Anderson, and Kaiden Guhle's going to make sure that he's protected and hopefully others follow suit.
Definitely. All right, let's now take a quick look at the Habs prospect report.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
Starting with some prospect news in the NCAA. If you were hoping, holding your breath, crossing your fingers and toes, that maybe you'd see Michael Hage go pro next year, well, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, because he has confirmed, and I believe rightly so, that he's going to return to the University of Michigan next season for another year of NCAA action. I think that's the wise course. He had a tremendous freshman season. We'll see how things progress for him as far as accolades around his rookie season in the NCAA, but I think he can only build more positive things in a sophomore season as well.
Yeah, point of game player in his freshman season. He wants to go back. He wants to win a championship with Michigan, and this isn't a surprise. We heard from Kent Hughes that was likely the path, but confirmed this week by Michael Hage.
Ivan Demidov. Roman Rotenberg, head coach for SKA St. Petersburg, announced this week that Demidov will participate in the playoffs.
That's kind of him.
As the 13th forward.
Yeah, that's where you want to put your leading scorer. But at least, Rotenberg had hinted that maybe Demidov would be scratched for the play. Maybe he'd be sent to the MHL.
Yeah.
But no, he participated. The first game, SKA's first playoff game, was Thursday, and just to get the point across, Demidov spent the entire first period on the bench. And then for the last 2 periods got in for just under 8 minutes, in time on ice. That's your leading scorer, the way he's treated. And maybe no surprise that Moscow Dynamo beat SKA 3-1. They're
playing again today.
Yeah, as we're recording. The score currently, I think it's at the end of the second. They're just starting the third period. Score is 1-1 with Moscow Dynamo and SKA. Who has the only goal for SKA? That would be Ivan Demidov. Yeah,
that's funny. The NCAA Div 1 Ice Hockey Championship has begun. The 16 teams competing to get to the Frozen Four are currently playing in the regional tournaments that take place in 4 different regional locations around the country in single elimination games. The Allentown, I always mention, living in Eastern Pennsylvania, that the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, the AHL affiliate of the Philadelphia Flyers, typically for the last number of years has hosted the Midwest Regionals, courtesy of Penn State being the host, and they're doing that again this year. So the winners of those 4 regional mini tournaments will move on to the Frozen Four, which starts April 10th at Enterprise Center in St. Louis. And Rick, there's some Canadiens prospects who are in this phase of getting to the Frozen Four championship.
Well, of those 16 on those 16 teams, there were 4 prospects that 4 Canadiens prospects that started the tournament. Jacob Fowler with Boston College, Logan Sawyer with Providence, Luke Middlestat, University of Minnesota, and Sam Harris with Denver. We know Jacob Fowler. We talk a lot about Jacob Fowler. Jacob Fowler has had a sensational season. And in the first match, Boston College is ranked the top team overall in the tournament. Then Michigan State, then Maine, then Western Michigan. So Boston College on Friday beat Bentley. That was their first entry into this tournament. 3-1, Jacob Fowler getting the win, and so they advance. Jacob Fowler continues on. and it was Providence against Denver. So that pitted Logan Sawyer against Sam Harris. Sam Harris, we talked about earlier, 22 goals this season in his second year at the college level. Had a great season, and Denver won this one easily, 5-1. So it will be, as they advance to the finals, the regional finals, it will be Boston College against Denver, Jacob Fowler against Sam Harris. That guarantees that one Canadiens prospect will be going to the Frozen Four in St. Louis, as you mentioned. Logan Sawyer eliminated, and Luke Mittelstadt, his team, University of Minnesota, eliminated. Now, he was when drafted by the Canadiens, he was an overager. There's been some talk about whether Luke Mittelstadt will sign a PTO perhaps and join Laval or not. That'll be interesting to watch. But this is always an exciting tournament. We'll see how far Jacob Fowler's able to carry his team. Will Jacob Fowler join Laval for the end of the season? That's interesting. And what will happen then? As we know, Jakub Dobiš has
Been papered.
And is backing up. But as you say, Kaiden Primo's been great. Laval's been humming along. And, Jacob Fowler's been dominant for 2 years. I don't see any reason that he would return to play college again next year. If they don't win the championship, does he want to win a championship? I don't know. I think he's proven everything that he has to prove. And Kent Hughes has talked about a long playoff run in Laval being very important for their young prospects. Why wouldn't it also apply to the organization's most important goalie prospect? Mm-hmm. Not saying, give him the net, but why wouldn't you add him to the roster? Or I don't know. It's going to be interesting, and probably some of that's going to depend on how Boston College and Jacob Fowler do if they get to the Frozen Four championship in early April.
And some of it will also depend, I think, on what position Laval does end the regular season in, if they get a first round bye, if they've got a little bit of breathing room, that type of thing. This week, they certainly had their foot fully on the gas pedal, beating the Cleveland Monsters 6-0 in a shootout last weekend, and they beat Toronto 4-1. That was on Friday night. They play again. They play the Lehigh Valley Phantoms at Place Bell on Saturday night. They are still sitting first in the North Division, first in the AHL. They've got 10 games remaining. That win on Friday night against the Marlies allowed Laval to finally clinch a playoff spot, so they are officially in. Now it's just a matter of watching everyone else in the division and watching what Laval does to see if they can maintain that top spot in the division and win the division title or not. A couple of other things. The Laval Rockets signed winger Mark Estapa to a PTO this week after his season was done at the University of Michigan. So signing an NCAA player there. You mentioned there's question marks as to whether or not one or two other NCAA players may arrive soon. The other one,
I'll just mention with respect to Mark Estapa, mm-hmm. You said an NCAA player from the University of Michigan, a teammate of Michael Hage, mm-hmm. And he spent all 4 years at the University of Michigan, that being Mark Estapa. That's
right. The other one to keep an eye on is Oliver Kapanen.
Yeah.
Timrå lost their last game, so I believe they are now down 3-2 in the series against Frölunda. So they've got they're up against it. They are facing elimination, and so if things go, we certainly hope wish Timra and Oliver Kapanen all the best, and maybe they can pull even in the series and keep things going. But if worst case scenario, if they are eliminated, Oliver Kapanen's season in the SHL could be done as early next week. And so then it will be all eyes on when and if he will arrive in North America to join Laval. So something to keep an eye on for sure. Trois-Rivières had a rough week, actually. They lost all 3 of their games this week. They did manage to get a couple of points in overtime in 2 games, but they've dropped down to 5th overall in the ECHL. Not that that's a terrible thing. They're still 5th overall in the ECHL. They're doing just fine. They just had a little bit of a hiccup this week.
They don't like Worcester, obviously.
They don't like Worcester.
No. All 3 games against them this week.
Lost 5-4 to Worcester in overtime, lost 5-4 to Worcester in regulation, lost 3-2 to Worcester in overtime. So maybe they just really want to get out of Worcester. Finally, in this segment in hockey news, the big news this week was, that on Thursday morning, the Philadelphia Flyers announced that Danny Briere had parted ways with head coach John Tortorella. It's no secret that things have not been easy for the Philadelphia Flyers this season or the previous season or the season before that, but apparently there are reports that there was a bit of a verbal incident between Tortorella and defenseman Cam York earlier this week when the team was in Toronto. And that may have been kind of the final straw. We did see Cam York dressed in Thursday night's game against Montreal, but he was pasted to the bench the entire night. He didn't play a single second, not one shift. And it's believed that is partially disciplinary measures because of his part of whatever argument took place between him and Torts. Briere promoted assistant Brad Shaw as interim head coach for the rest of the season. And we'll see. I think a lot of Flyers fans are thinking, no, don't start winning, please. Please don't start winning now, please. But I think the Flyers themselves probably had a big sigh of relief to come out with a victory on Thursday night, and we'll see how that continues for them. But big shakeup.
Yeah, and John Tortorella is a larger than life character, and this was a larger than life incident. He had benched Cam York for the last 2/3 of the game against Toronto. There was some discussion about that, and folks who know say it wasn't quite a physical confrontation, but everything else and that both parties crossed the line. And there's a lot of talk about whether John Tortorella was pushing this. He wasn't happy with the organization, and Danny Briere wants to improve the team. He got rid of some veterans at the deadline, and the Flyers tanked after that. And John Tortorella said, I don't like coaching this kind of situation.
Not interested in learning how to coach in this if Marty St. is the protege, obviously, of that's been said many times, of Tortorella, and they have their differences, but they have a lot of similarities. The way they react, both of them have big egos, larger than life, and go their own way. They don't like advice. They don't like to be questioned. And John Tortorella was, I think he he had just stopped listening to and communicating with his bosses, with the GM and hockey operations staff, and he had, everything from. How much I've complained about the fact that, yes, he's his own person, but does he get to look like a slob behind the bench with his, hoodie and they only wear
that sort of thing,
pullovers, no suits behind the bench,
all that. Anyway, so it's this was, I guess, a long time coming, but he had a year left on his contract, and it will be interesting to see if he does turn up somewhere for the Canadiens fans who say, wow, let's reunite Marty St. Louis and John Tortorella. Bad idea, people.
Watch what you asked.
Yeah, please
Watch
no.
what you wish
no,
for.
No, 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 no.
And I agree with you. And that's someone who I agree with John Tortorella having been hired in Philadelphia when he was hired. I think he was exactly the right hire for the Flyers at that time. I think he did a wondrous job for the first few seasons that he was there in turning around the culture in that room and getting them, as Danny Briere said, getting the team back to understanding and living what it meant to play Philadelphia Flyers hockey. It's just gone off the rails. I think it's now time for a new direction, a new perspective, a new voice. But even with all that said, no, I think it would be a disaster if he came to Montreal.
Yeah, and it's a right coach for the right time.
Right.
He was the right coach for the right, just like Marty St. Louis was the right coach at the right time for the way the Canadiens, what they needed. But, teams change, rebuilds move on, process changes, and sometimes coaches don't change.
That's right. All right, we're going to take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Coming up, it is our big topic segment. The Habs hot streak turns cold at a crucial point in the playoff race. We're going to get into all the ins and outs of what is going on with the Habs right now, and can they turn it around? You are not going to want to miss it, so stick around. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Hey, basketball fans, are you ready to win some real money? Check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 dunks on its rivals, including Prize Picks. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like points, rebounds, three-pointers, and more. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6 and cash in your basketball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, my name is Amy Johnson. If you'd like to follow me on X, please, you're invited to do so. You can find me at Flyers Rule. And of course, I'm here with our president and founder of Rocket Sports, my co-host, Rick Stevens. You'll want to follow him on X as well. It's at Rocket Sports. It's the absolute X account to follow for all of our content, all of our updates, Canadiens updates, Laval updates, Trois Rivières updates. It's all right there at Rocket Sports. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. If you've been liking the show so far and you'd like to hear more of this every single week. And that's all through the off season as well, I should say, because, well, if the Canadiens don't turn things around, the off season is going to be here for them sooner rather than later. So I want to mention, we'll be here with you all summer long. So make sure you're subscribed. We don't ever want you to miss an episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. Okay, so it's become pretty. If there's one thing that's like kind of crystal clear about this season, it's that the Canadiens are either running really hot or bitterly cold. There's like no happy medium. There's no temperate, moderate temperature. It's either hot or cold. No middle ground. Very Jekyll and Hyde-ish. And this season's version of the Canadiens have really taken their fans on a wild kind of roller coaster ride of highs and lows. You think back to December, right around the holiday season, and the coined phrase of that month with pundits all over the NHL was that the Habs were the hottest team in the league.
And they were.
And they were. Then leading up to the February Four Nations break, they went on a gigantic skid, losing 8 of 9 games, which really kind of took them to a really unsure footing. Then they came back from the Four Nations break and they looked great for like a week and a half. The whole cycle started all over again. Had the best record in the NHL coming out of that tournament. Now they're on a 5-game losing streak again. If inconsistency has been their consistent theme this year, it really has. Spearheaded by the captain, Nick Suzuki, the Canadiens really seem to welcome that whole challenge of getting the youth on the team exposed to the strain of playing some meaningful games in the month of March. The whole in the mix has been around since September. Kent Hughes completely abandoned his plan to sell things off at the trade deadline because partially convinced by his captain in that meeting that they had, but also that they had been, they were gonna turn things around, and that a playoff push. They had gotten better after the Four Nations tournament, and that pushing for the playoffs would be a better benefit than anything Hughes could do at the trade deadline. So I guess, Rick, the first thing to really kind of talk about is now that we've seen, sure, they had a great record coming out of the Four Nations break, and now that it's just completely gone in the gutter, is this team really ready for this phase of the rebuild?
Who knows? Like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get from this team. Well, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get streaks of, as you said, hot and cold, and like they look like world beaters, and like Kent Hughes said, we can play with anybody. And then as they hit their cold streak, they can't play with anyone. So it's funny because those winning and losing streaks kind of sneak up to you, up to fans and us. We were just talking about how well they were playing after the Four Nations break, and then a couple of losses in overtime and everything, and now they're in a 5-game losing streak. It's really bizarre, and I think that it may be more devastating if this wild card race wasn't moving at such a snail's pace. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to. They
can't give it away.
Exactly. You look through and the wild card race. Canadiens, they're on a 5-game winless streak. The Islanders are on a losing streak. Rangers, Detroit's kind of almost out of it now, except they've lost 2 in a row. But even doing that, they're 3 points out of a playoff spot. That's insane. All it took for Columbus was to win 2 games. That's all it took for them to move.
The bar is low.
It is to move into the final spot. It's and the projections. When you look and you see that, one of these teams is going to take that final spot, and they're likely going to do it with maybe 87 points. That's pitifully low. When you look back to previous years, even last year, we're looking at mid-90s in terms of points that it would take to get that, or at least 93, 94 points, and somebody's going to at least get to the first round of the playoffs. Who knows how far they're going to take it with in and around 87 points. So the Canadiens are never really comfortable, even when they're on a winning streak, and they're never really out of it when they go on these losing streaks. But the question is, can they put together over these next 10 games, can they put together another one of these phenomenal streaks where they look like they can beat anybody and take that final spot?
I guess then naturally, I love to play devil's advocate. Then if they do that, if they come up with some miraculous run down the stretch, are they going to follow their pattern? And then as soon as they make the playoffs, just totally turn it off again? I certainly hope not. But it.
Yeah. And why is this happening? And you said, talked about the consistency issue. And Kent Hughes, when he did his little media tour, talked about that as well, that the last thing that a team is able to grasp is consistency. Well, the Canadiens have consistency in 10-game batches. It just goes in opposite directions. Mm-hmm. And I think that, Nick Suzuki made a bold step in saying, give us the ball, we'll run with it. And Kent Hughes was kind of wondering, can my team withstand the mental pressure that it takes to be involved in those kind of games, meaningful names, must-win games night after night after night? Do I have the right veterans to do that? Do I have the right, are the young players mentally strong enough to handle that? And I think at least for the last few games, the answer has been no.
But maybe they're just going about it all wrong. At least there's a certain mindset that Marty St. believes is what they need now to approach these last 10 games.
Yeah, to me it's a little bit of pressure versus pleasure, We got to have fun with this 10, 11 games we got left. We got to have fun with it. We got to be direct and have good intentions, but we have to have fun to going through this process. Everybody's disappointed. You come out of this game, it doesn't seem like fun. But if you take a snapshot of where we are right now, it should still be fun. We're just going to remind them that.
Boys just got to have fun.
I don't think they had fun on Friday night either. This was after Thursday's game in Philadelphia.
This was really tough. This is our quote of the week, and it's big. I think you've had, since the decision was made to keep the band together and to play meaningful games and push for a playoff spot, Marty has been ratcheting up the spring. He's been tightening that spring for a month and putting pressure on his players and putting pressure on his players. And for the last 5 games, that's broken. The spring broke. And I think Marty is now realizing, my team as constructed couldn't handle the pressure. And now he's turning it, it was all for fun anyway. We got to focus on the fun aspect because he knows that that pressure was too much for his team, and he's wanting to distract from that and talk about get out there and enjoy the game, take some of that pressure off, and kind of whatever happens over the last 10 games, but focus on the fun. He knows it's more than about fun, but he also knows that the pressure got to his team and maybe it got ratcheted up too high before they were ready.
Because I'm sure that's what they all meant. Jeff Molson, Jeff Gordon, Kent Hughes at the golf tournament back in September when they wanted to be playing games that were in the mix. I'm sure they really meant that they just want to be sure that they're having fun.
Yeah, and they got what they wanted. The dog caught the car. And then what?
And then didn't know what to do with it.
and couldn't hang on to that playoff position, or as Lane Hudson said, when we got there, we should have been focused on the team above us, and that was our next goal. Not just holding, not just defending, not just fending off any of the teams below us, but going after in Ottawa. And they weren't able to do that because the pressure was just ratcheted up too high.
Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing, we talked about a couple of things that Kent Hughes had said. And I like that you had jotted this down to circle back to something that we had talked about that he said right after the trade deadline. And that was, he had said, quote, if the bottom, this was his justification for not making any moves at the trade deadline. He had said, quote, if the bottom had fallen out right away on us after the deadline, you'd feel terrible. And he felt comfortable, I think, to say that in his media interviews the following week after the trade deadline, because the Canadiens were doing great for about a week and a half. And then the bottom fell out. And so now they're kind of in that situation, right? The bottom has fallen out. It just didn't happen immediately after the trade deadline, Rick. And I think it was great that you recalled this quote for us to talk about it.
Yeah, it's fascinating because he was putting it in, a reason that justified the decision that he made. But now if you put it into the context now, is he feeling terrible? Is he feeling regret? If the Canadiens continue to fall away, is he going to look back and second guess the decision he made? But yeah, so it didn't turn out where the Canadiens, fallen out of the playoff race right away. So he didn't feel terrible. He felt really good that things fell into place for him. But now I wonder if those feelings that he talked about are coming back, entering his thoughts.
Absolutely. So where does that leave the Canadiens and everyone else? Because things are, there's just a log jam underneath Ottawa. There are 6 teams in the East who are in the wild card race above the 500 points percentage mark. Only two of them can take a wild card spot. Ottawa, as we've said for the last couple of weeks, seems to be firmly cemented in taking the first wild card spot. It's that second one that's up for grabs. And right now, Columbus occupies that second spot. Montreal is right below them, tied in points. But because of, we can talk about the tiebreakers and whatnot in a moment, but obviously Columbus has the tiebreaker right now.
Well, they played one fewer game
right.
Than the Canadiens right now.
That's right. The New York Islanders and the New York Rangers are tied, just 1 point behind Columbus and Montreal with 74 points. And Detroit is honestly kind of still hanging in there. They've got 72 points. They're only 3 points back of the Canadiens and the Blue Jackets. It's there for whoever wants to get off the schneid and go get it.
5 teams within 3 points of each other. As you said, Detroit 3 points out. They've only won 3 of their last 10 games. If they go on a run, that it seems unlikely given the way they're playing. But, it was a week ago on this broadcast that we were talking about Columbus having a single-digit chance of making the playoffs. And all it took
suddenly,
for them, was to win 2 games. So, anyway, as you said, Ottawa is free and clear more or less. In terms of tiebreakers, regulation wins. Rangers, nobody's catching them. They're at 31 regulation wins. The Islanders 25, Detroit 25, Montreal 24, Columbus at 23. Goal differential is always important for me. The Rangers at -3, Columbus -7, Islanders -19, Detroit -23, and Montreal, the worst of them all, at -28. But here's where it gets good for Montreal is they have one of the group. They have by far the easiest schedule remaining for their 10 games, 27th in ranked 27th in terms of strength of schedule by Tankathon. Detroit, number 1 in terms of strength of schedule. So that makes things for them tough. The Islanders 5th, Columbus 8th, Rangers 15th. So that brings us to our playoff odds, and we check Money Puck. We've been doing it using them for the entire season, so we'll stick with them. And this is crazy. 3 teams have a 25% chance. Columbus, the Rangers, and Montreal have a 25% chance of making the playoffs. The Islanders a 24% chance of making the playoffs. There are decimal points between those 4 teams in terms of who's going to make the playoffs. So talking about coin flip, if you had a 4-sided coin, it's going to be one of them. Columbus on pace for 86.2 points, Rangers 85.6, Islanders 85.6, the Canadiens on pace for 86 points. This is, you're going to want to come back next week, I think, and talk to us because this is just nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And listen, if somebody goes on a run, and that could be the Montreal Canadiens, the Jekyll and Hyde Canadiens, who suddenly decide they want to go on another winning streak, they can secure the last playoff spot.
That easy schedule for them to round out the season is mostly going to be because they're going to play, of the 9 games they play in April, 6 of them are at home. And so that's definitely an advantage for them. I don't know whether yet it's an advantage or a disadvantage for them that they do have to get there through 2 more games against the Florida Panthers, because on paper, Florida should be just destroying them, but Florida hasn't done that yet this season. So Paul Maurice's crew has 2 shots this week to make up for the dismal performance they've had against Montreal the last 2 games that the last 2 times they've met them this season. The next one is this Sunday. Since the Habs do not play on Saturday night, they just did a back-to-back on Thursday night and Friday night. They don't play Saturday night, but they do play in Sunrise, Florida at 1:00 on Sunday afternoon. And so that's going to be a big test. And then they meet.
And it's a home and home.
It's a home and home because Florida then travels to Montreal for Tuesday night's games. So we'll see. It's
and Boston. Okay, Boston hasn't been very good, particularly since the trade deadline, and sending Brad Marchand away. But a Montreal-Boston game never seems to matter. Where either team is in the standings. They're always tough games, they're always tight games. Mm-hmm. Mentioning Brad Marchand, well, the Canadiens will see him twice. As he's playing. Yeah, he'll have his, I think it's his 2nd game in a Panthers jersey on Sunday, and then his 3rd game in a Panthers jersey in Montreal on Tuesday.
The interesting thing for me will be that Thursday game against Boston, as you mentioned. No matter what the standings say, those 2 teams don't like each other. Those 2 teams really get up for those rivalry games. I think the key will be, can the youth on the Canadiens squad get around that distraction and focus on the bigger prize? And that, in terms of discipline, Arbor Jack Guy, I'm talking to you. Those types of decisions and the mindset that they take into that game of, yes, we want to beat them. Yes, it's Boston and we don't like them, but we have a bigger goal in mind. That'll be key for me.
The other thing I'll mention, and yes, the Canadiens have a home-heavy schedule. Yes, they play inferior opponents on paper, but in the space of 7 days, they have 2, not 1, but 2 back-to-backs. Saturday, Sunday against the Flyers and Nashville. And then the following Friday, Saturday against, and those are both road games against the Senators and Leafs. So it's not all rainbows and that kind of thing.
It's not. So that brings us to this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. Can the Montreal Canadiens go on one last hot streak to end the season, or is their playoff dream slipping away? We want to hear from you, so be sure to send us a text on the Rocket Sports text line, 5853-ROCKET. Drop us a comment on YouTube. Drop us a comment on social media at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, or Instagram. Answering the question, can the Canadiens pull off one last hot streak to end the season, or is their playoff dream slipping away? Let us know. We want to hear from you. And on the other side of this last break on today's podcast, we are going to bring you the things that you had to say in answer to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. So stick around. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Hey, basketball fans, are you ready to win some real money? Check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 dunks on its rivals, including Prize Picks. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like points, rebounds, three-pointers, and more. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6 and cash in your basketball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And welcome back once again to episode 341 of the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. Don't forget, be sure you're following us on social media. Be sure you are subscribed to the podcast. Like the episode if you're on YouTube as well. Hit share, whether you're listening on your podcast player or if you're watching on YouTube. Share this episode. Leave us a review if you're able to. We just want to make sure that you and all of your friends have the best access to the Canadiens Connection podcast. Don't forget, get in your replies to this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. Can the Canadiens go on one last hot streak to end the season, or is their playoff dream slipping away? And before we talk about what last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week is, Rick, when we talk about can they go on one last hot streak, there was one thing that I know you wanted to talk about in terms of is this a method that they could use to maybe go on a hot streak? Is there a tool that they could pull out of the toolbox?
Well, I think that some people have been talking about can they get help? Can they get some help? And I don't think we're going to see that. We heard Kent Hughes, and when I talk about help, is it Logan Mailloux coming up? Is it, will Oliver Kapanen come straight over to the Canadian? I don't think so, and I think the issue there, we've heard it from Kent Hughes saying that he at the deadline he didn't want to touch Laval, he didn't want to create holes that would have to be filled with players from Laval. And I think that applies to as they try to go on a bit of a hot streak to secure a playoff spot. I think it applies there too, because I've seen a lot of talk about, well, let's bring up David Reinbacher, and he's got to be better than a David Savard or some problems on the right side. if you've been involved in that and you haven't been listening to us, you may not know that David Reinbacher is being managed right now after his injury and his return to play. Talk about load management. Well, it's never clear whether he's going to be in a game or not. This past week we saw where he even took the warm up and was pulled in a situation. Canadiens just didn't like what they saw or didn't like what David Reinbacher was reporting after the warm up. Chris G, as you know, we aren't the only ones part of this Rocket Sports team. I've mentioned Dr. Stephen Morris, who's on the show. Patrick Williams, with respect to, he's the AHL guru and is part of this team. Well, Chris G, he camps out at Place Belle and does a very effective job covering the Laval Rocket. And from last night's game, lots of euphoria about the Rocket making the playoffs. But Chris asked whether David Reinbacher would be playing on Sunday. And the answer, in French, the answer that Pascal Vincent, the head coach, gave was, quote, "I don't know. I don't know," says the head coach. "I will receive a call or a text, and I will be told tomorrow on what happens. I don't know." So the folks in Laval are not making the decision on David Reinbacher. That direction is coming from the Montreal Canadiens staff. And do you think then that they're going to risk, if they don't even want to put him in, the games going down the stretch as Laval finishes the season, because of worrying about a knee injury? They're not even putting him in consecutive games. Are they going to want to put him into an NHL lineup? I don't think so. So don't expect the Canadiens, unless there's an injury or something, don't expect the Canadiens to receive some help. They have one more non-injury call-up. So there might be one, but there aren't going to be wholesale changes. And as we know, Marty St. likes to keep his lineup the way he likes it.
He does. All right. So last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week was, how confident are you in Montreal's playoffs? Let me try that again. Let's just go back. How confident are you in Montreal's playoff chances on a scale from 1 to 10? And I don't know that anyone actually gave us a number on a scale from 1 to 10.
We did.
Did we get one? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I like it when people follow instructions. Come on now. You're going to get us started with a nice response from Dino on Substack.
On Substack, our friend Dino says, "Lubien Shea, not a good week for the Canadiens. Pressure is too much. Pressure too much to win. No country club atmosphere to fall back on when the going gets tough. Leadership, goaltending, and coaching can get you through these situations, but the CH has been weak in these areas lately. He's saying weak in leadership, weak in goaltending, and weak in coaching. It's not over yet. We have to make adjustments, start adding more leadership and grit. Play Pizzetta, change up the lines a bit. Win and you're in for the goaltenders." That's interesting.
Yeah.
Just some thoughts. Great thoughts, Dino. And we know he's a big fan of Michael Pizzetta.
We do know that. Over on YouTube, our friend Leonid chimed in on this week. He says, "Great show. Thank you. Over the past couple of weeks, my opinion about the playoff fever has changed. The reason for this wasn't the results, as you might think, but the fact that the result this season will not affect the future of the team. The declared goal, play important games in April, has been achieved. It seems that the coaching staff will continue to next season, regardless of whether the team gets to the postseason or not. So if I have to choose between not making the playoffs and saving the coach and getting to the playoffs and saving the coach, I'll choose playoffs. Last time, Canadiens didn't look like favorites at all, but they were successful. And you remember that was the 2021 run when Carey Price and Shea Weber sacrificed their entire bodies to basically limp the Canadiens as far as they could possibly get into the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Sacrifice their careers, as it
Basically,
turned out.
Yeah. So he says last time Canadiens didn't look like, and that was a pure Cinderella run. Every series was, oh, well, there's no way they're winning this series. And then they would win the series. He said they didn't look like favorites at all, but they were successful. Playoffs is a completely different game in every sense. Great feeling when spring games are important. I thought that by the end of March, I would concentrate on individual player performances, but the team had other plans.
And Leonid from St. Petersburg.
Yes, and that was a great response. I like that.
Our dear friend Center Ice, and he and I have been going back and forth respectfully, very respectfully, brotherly like. I think it was categorized. And he says, "Great show again, Amy and Rick. Rick, I love your reply, but I'll explain myself clearer."
Is this going to be a never-ending saga?
I think so. It is a saga. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we should. Yeah. He said, "I pray we get to go out for a beer someday and shoot the breeze." I changed some words there. Most
Family-friendly
things
show,
we
yeah.
are in agreement on. However, you realize I must turn it back on you again. I know I'd have so much fun with you if we were both out for a brew talking hockey. But first, let me answer this week's question. We were talking about whether to pick up picks, whether it was worth it to pick up picks, in particular, second round pick at the 1 or 2 second round picks at the deadline. As far as this week's question, my confidence in the Habs grabbing a final wild card spot is at between a 3 and a 4. So yes,
That's the number. All right. I wanted a number.
There's your number. It's between a 3 and a 4.
All right.
I think the schedule's going to catch up to us, and Ottawa seems to have the first wild card locked up. I think we're going to wear down, and I don't have much faith in Monty, and Dobish isn't getting a fair shake. He sat for too long. You could see him swim a bit in the crease last time he played, and I think that all of that is fair and correct. Montembeault, he says we've been relying too much on Montembeault for my liking. Montembeault giving up 2 to 3 bad goals a game is going to burn us in the end. I'm kind of summarizing here because it's a novel. This is definitely
he definitely showed his work in this response.
He did, which we like and welcome. Talks about the Rangers, about their scoring power and goaltending. Talks about the Islanders next. And he said, but I'm very proud of my Habs. I just can't see putting my faith in Monty. Definitely showing positive signs for the future. Now let's get back to Rick, he says. And he says, don't quote me, but here's how my future lines. And he goes through and lists the lines, forwards, defense, goaltenders, the whole bit. And he says that then we need a number 2 center to fill in while Michael Hage develops. There's no big league contract space left. That's why I say we have to be careful, and we don't need a shot at more second round picks. We're going to be full, he said. We have far too many picks already, and I believe Hughes will use the draft to line up a center for here and now. And he talks about a player in the lineup he's not certain about is Joshua Waugh. He forgot about Kapanen, got to include him as well. And he said, anyway, that there's just no room at the inn, but I get where you're coming from. That's the only reason on this situation I don't agree. However, I do respect both of your opinions. You have a great hockey mind. That's why I usually agree 99% of the time with you. Thank God we all have common sense and can respectfully disagree. And absolutely, it's all about respect. It's all about giving a forum to people to make their points without criticize. We heard that from
She 26 talks about that a lot. Yep.
Yeah. As far as the ongoing back and forth, I
it's very fun.
It is fun. It is great. It is to do it respectfully and in a brotherly way. And I would refer my dear friend, Center Heiss, to an article that came out in La Presse right around the trade deadline. It was Matthias Brunet. And the question he asked was, can you have too many draft picks?
Oh, boy.
And it's a beautifully written article. He references Michael. The reason the Canadiens were able to get Michael Hage is because they had the flexibility, the array of draft picks to be able to use them, just to find the right draft pick to make the deal to move up in the draft. To get anyway, the long and the short of it is Matthias Brunet says you can never have too many draft picks. Acknowledging the issues that you don't go out and use every draft pick to select a player, because that's going to cause a log jam and you don't have as many contract spaces, and all of that acknowledged. Center Heiss knows that. He said that, and we absolutely agree. So he says, I have great respect for you both, but Rick made this one fun. You had me roaring. Great debate. I just pray there's no more reclamation projects. Tired of Newhook and Doc. They've both been disappointing. I agree 100%. We need to have a beer and Habs discussion someday, because I think we think a lot alike for the most part. Keep the great shows coming. This has been a lot of fun. And he goes on. That's the
great.
kind of back and forth we do like with our very intelligent, very knowledgeable, great hockey minds, our wonderful listenership out there.
And viewership. Absolutely. Thank you very much for your responses. If you want to get in on the conversation, heck, if you want to reply to one of the responses you heard today, even, just be sure that you get in a reply on our YouTube channel, send it in on the Rocket Sports text line, or hit us up on social media. It's going to be an interesting week. 2 games against the Florida Panthers. The first one is on Sunday at 1 p.m. Then back in Montreal on Tuesday against the Panthers. Thursday at the Bell Center against the Boston Bruins. Should be some hopefully exciting games of hockey. And maybe we'll have a win to talk about next week.
Late breaking update. There's no wins in St. Petersburg, or for St. Petersburg against Moscow Dynamo. They lost in overtime 2-1. And they're down 2-0 in the series. The only goal today was Ivan Demidov.
Yeah. All right. Be sure to come back next Saturday, April 5th, for our next episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. Until then, enjoy the week, enjoy hockey, and we will see you then. You're not going to want to miss it. Thank you for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.